first real experience with wolves was back in about the mid-1970s when I was a university student. You know how it is, sitting in the lectures, the professor speaking gobbledygook. So I ended up with my scribblers all covered with pictures of spruce trees and mountains and the wolves I hoped to see. On the weekends, I would take the bus to the city limits and then hitchhike out to Banff. This one particular day in April, walking through this old winter snow that just exhausts you because you're punching through all the time, I finally just sort of gave up. And so I just rolled up my sleeping gear on the top of a snowdrift and fell asleep. And I woke up about 10 in the evening. It was pitch black out, and there was that wolf howling. Just right off the edge of my head almost. It sounded like it was virtually on my lap. First time I'd ever heard a wolf howl. It was just the most terrifying experience I'd ever had, you know, the hair standing on end. So I spent the whole night watching the stars, waiting to get eaten, and nothing happened. I was kind of glad to survive that one. My name is Kevin Van Tighem. I'm the author of The Homeward Wolf and spent most of my life working as a biologist and a naturalist in Western Canada's national parks. I've spent enough time around wolves and enough time around the issues involved with wolves to realize that what we're doing doesn't work. It hasn't been working for years, and we just keep on doing more of it, hoping it will work. That's sort of the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
In 2005, the government of Alberta began a wolf cull in the Little Smoky region in an attempt to save the threatened woodland caribou. Biologists behind this cull have been publishing their results in the Canadian Journal of Zoology. So we know that in the past 9 years, they've killed more than 1,000 wolves and around 700 other animals by accident. But unfortunately, this cull hasn't been effective. They're taking out 100% of the wolf population within the region every year. But wolves from other parts of the province have just been moving in and taking their place. The study also openly states they weren't able to increase the local caribou population. They used two techniques: aerial gunning from a helicopter and strychnine poisoning. Both have been widely criticized as inhumane.
It's a very, very strange study based on a lack of facts, and it employs a lot of unacceptable techniques, such as shooting from the helicopter or using strychnine baits, which have been banned in all Western countries.
It's difficult to hit a wolf, a moving target, from a helicopter. So many are left wounded, can't keep a count.
If the shot doesn't reach the wolf properly, well, then the animal gets hurt, it will go into hiding, it may take 2 days to die. We don't know, we don't have any results on how those animals were hit, and we have no indication how long they took.
The other thing is how stressful that is for the animals. To be chased by a helicopter, they run and run and run to try and escape. They know that there's this thing hovering above them and they're frightened. It's very upsetting to watch. And, you know, I just thought how evil that is, you know?
Tracking wolves from the air and shooting from the air, we just can't get there. We can't get enough of them. So we set up toxicant sites.
Strychnine, poison 1080, these things are not used in other parts of the world. They're horrific. It's, you feel it in your bones. It's a spooky feeling. It's horror in the true sense.
It may take 5 or 6 hours to kill an animal. It can go through as many as 8 convulsions. And during one of those convulsions, it will die.
You basically suffocate while your spine is snapping.
The lips curl up and they spasm and they'll paddle and dig holes in their pain, cry.
They're legal tools we have in our toolbox to use to remove problem wolves, and they can be pretty effective.
But there are arguments that they're inhumane and that they shouldn't be legal.
They're legal tools we have in our toolbox.
But so you think they're humane?
No, I didn't say that. Doesn't matter what I think. They're legal tools we have in our toolbox, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what I think, right? I mean, I have a job. It doesn't matter what I think.
The situation in the Little Smoky is one of those sad stories that we get to live with at this stage of Western civilization. I remember back in the 1980s, the Little Smoky was actually proposed as a boreal wilderness park. Instead, they opened it up to logging, and they started issuing oil and gas leases.
Wolves and caribou have lived together forever. It's a natural thing. But the current situation is a consequence, really, of land use changes, considerably by our industrial activities, which have upset the ecological balance.
If you go in the Little Smoky area, you have 3 kilometers of seismic line per square kilometer. Every half kilometer, you will encounter a seismic line. They are everywhere.
5% of that land is left intact, the natural habitat, the rest disturbed by industry.
It's now riddled with roads. It's riddled with clear cuts that are full of second growth. It's got all sorts of industrial activity. And with all the disturbance that's happened, it's created an awful lot of vegetation that is supporting an awful lot more deer and elk and moose than there used to be. And they, in turn, are supporting more wolves than they used to be. And so now, at this stage of history, they're saying, well, we're almost out of caribou. We got to do something, and the wolves are eating them. Well, of course the wolves are eating them. There's a lot of wolves because there's a lot of things for wolves to eat. If they really cared about caribou, which is the part I don't believe, they would be doing something about habitat.
Is the provincial government and the federal government going to put a moratorium on oil and gas? It's not going to happen. So instead, we scapegoat the wolves.
When caribou are scarce, it's a sign of an ecosystem that's not healthy. So how does it make sense in that situation to make war on the rest of the ecosystem? Wolves are not the problem. We're the problem. Wolves are just another victim.
It's hard. Those are hard things to do. A lot of wealth is generated for the province and for our people in the forested lands. A lot of people work in the forested lands.
Even if we went in and we said, you know what, we're going to remove all oil and gas, we're going to remove all logging and everything, the damage has all been done in a place like the Little Smoky. We're 50 years away from that being restored back to being good caribou habitat for the most part. So I don't know what our plan is. We're going to kill wolves there for 50 years?
The average aerial gunning cost per wolf is about $3,000. When does the dollar run out?
I think we're in for a decade for sure. There are a variety of plans being discussed right now with respect to habitat restoration. If we can make some progress there, we'll see, but we're in for a bit of a long haul on this.
There is no happy outcome here. We're going to lose caribou, or we're going to blow away a lot of wolves and still lose caribou. It just shouldn't be like this, but it is.
Who's right and who's wrong? Is the oil company and profit more important than a species? Tough question.
Wolf behavior in the wild is extremely similar to what we often see with our dogs. I've seen wolves playing with a pair of boxers that they found on the side of a road, throwing them up into the air and charging around and eventually tearing them to shreds in the meadow where they were playing, just as a couple of dogs would do in a dog park.
There are some that still argue animals don't have feelings, and it is bad science to argue that because it is consistently shown that they do. The wolf falls into the secondary group, along with elephants and dolphins, non-human primates. They're in an elite class. The wolf is 36 times more intelligent than the dog.
Very, very affectionate. You know, they're often licking each other and nose to nose.
And the family structure within a wolf pack is something that every human family should really strive for, I think. Just the closeness and the bonding between all the wolf pack members.
There are many stories of wolves returning to try and help other family members, pack members that are in snares and traps.
They're easily the hardest animal to catch, easily, insanely intelligent. The intricacies of their social network is baffling. It's so much more complicated and more intricate than we'll ever be able to understand. You never know more about an animal than you do when it outsmarts you constantly.
There was a pack of wolves for many years here, and I reduced that pack right down, but I never did get the alpha female. And she saw a lot of the other wolves in the pack get caught, and I used to see her tracks on my tracks, following me around, seeing what I was doing, where I was going, investigating my sets, that kind of thing. Did I get the feeling I was being studied, you know, and that I was the one? You know, not the wolf, who was being not so much hunted, but analyzed. It got to the point where she would stop the pack before she got to one of my bait stations, crawl on her belly across the snow so as not to leave any tracks or sign, and go up and check out the bait and crawl back out again. She's still out there. I have not caught that wolf.
I was always pretty interested in wildlife. I always knew I wanted to do something in the field. And then I got an internship at a wildlife rescue place. I kind of thought, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be like a rescuer, and I'm gonna be doing all this stuff honorably on behalf of the wildlife. I should know about hunting and trapping so that I can know like why it's bad and why I'm gonna take those guys down, right?
Good cat.
This is a perfect catch.
That's a nice beaver.
So I asked Bill if I could come out with him for a while. My internship was ending, and he said, yeah, you can try it out if you want. And after that, I just started trapping. Never looked back, I guess.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Just the amount of integrity and respect that went into it, just hearing them talk about the wildlife with such adoration in their voices, it was not what I expected.
When you catch them like that under the ice, they just never even know what hit them. It's that fast. Nothing in this wilderness dies in its sleep, ever. Animals die of starvation. They are torn to pieces by predators. They die a long, slow, lingering death by disease. The most humane death an animal is ever going to have is at the hands of a hunter or trapper. That is an absolute guarantee. You see the big snare? That's a typical wolf set. So when the wolf hits that, the snare tightens on his neck, the compression spring releases, and it actually doesn't choke the wolf. It cuts off the blood supply to his brain, and he's just unconscious in seconds. Very humane, very, very effective.
If you see the footage where they've been caught in traps.
Look, you're right through there. I don't know if you can see him. Timber wolf in the snare right there.
Often they will freeze. They're petrified. Most animals in that situation, in a trap or cornered, would be fighting for their lives. They don't fight, and it's a horrible thing to see, but that's the animal that we're talking about.
Although in most places bounties have been abandoned, here in Alberta, they are rampant. In the last 4 years, municipalities in Alberta spent over $300,000 to have more than 1,100 wolves killed. and that's only accounting for the 6 out of 10 whose bounty data are available. Then there are the hunting organizations who've paid for hundreds more wolves to be killed. Last year, the Wild Sheep Foundation spent $35,500 on what they're referring to as ungulate enhancement, or, in other words, finding a way to protect game for them to shoot.
You know, there's a bunch of assumptions there that somehow if we just kill a lot of wolves, or try to kill a lot of wolves...
We're trying to manage wolves.
But I don't think you're succeeding.
Is it working? Yeah. Probably not. But the reason that because it's part of a management plan for wolves of predators. We've definitely had, legal counsel on this. Is this legal? Is it not legal? Do we have...
In Alberta, it's legal.
It is?
Yeah.
That is correct.
I'm just saying it's not appropriate.
Right.
Wow. I'm not convinced that snaring wolves, it's not a quick kill like it is with other animals that don't have that musculature and that gag reflex.
This is a paper that was run, in a wildlife management where, because a snare is a killing device, they don't need to be checked.
A killing device. We see the problem with wolves is that wolves take more than a week to die.
I don't agree with that. If the trapper does his work properly, and this is a paper Dwight Rodka.
The paper Reg is referencing was written by Dwight Rodka and Gilbert Proulx. I was surprised he did, since they're not his biggest fans.
How long does it take a snare to kill a wolf? That can vary from, if they're extremely lucky, 15 or 20 minutes. One might die from strangulation and constricture of the carotid arteries. But that's unusual. It's not unusual for them to live a day or to live 2 days. I know of cases where they've lived a week.
The wolves have a musculature structure and a trachea and a blood system that doesn't allow them to die quickly with a snare. The snare cannot strangle it to death because through the gasping behavior, the wolves will maintain some air exchange with their brain.
Snares, they're incredibly inhumane, and yet the provincial government classes them as a killing device, and so therefore you can legally set one of those killing devices in the fall and not check it again until spring. Legally, you can do that.
The wolf in a trap, they're in danger of freezing to death. They can starve to death. They can be prey of other predators. This jellyhead phenomena is got to be agonizing.
So you get this phenomenon called jellyhead, where basically the blood can't get out of the head to the heart. It just keeps going into the head, and the head swells up, the brain swells up, the face swells up, and eventually the head virtually explodes. The animal dies of just this compression of its face.
Its eyes can swell shut and freeze. Its muzzle and mouth is just huge. Its neck is the same size as its body and its shoulders. It's incredibly gross, is what it is.
The other thing that you get with wolves and with coyotes is chew-outs, where wolves will chew their way out of the snare. Because they don't die instantly, they're able to get at the snare, they twist around, they bite at it, they break their teeth. Those teeth are their way of making a living, so without their teeth, they're going to die slowly now from starvation. And they escape with the snare around their neck.
And that snare keeps working and working and working, and it'll almost decapitate the animal. It'll work through the hide and the flesh and everything. There's actually a photo in the Gilbert paper on snaring that I mentioned.
The success rate of the snares that I use, I'm up around above 95%. It's inevitable there'll be the odd wreck, the odd blow up. They are certainly not the standard. I remember every bad experience I ever had with any animal that I didn't catch it or kill it the way that it should or could have been done. Nobody wants to be responsible for the suffering of another living thing.
Oh, yeah, they say that, yeah. Some people may visit days after they said it, and they find the wolf dead, and they conclude he died humanely. But that is not necessarily the truth.
It all boils down to the fact that the device itself, the design, is inherently not capable of causing death within a reasonable length of time.
So the death is long and painful.
It's just no holds bars. Anybody do anything you want.
So I'm heading into Pincher Creek to have a visit with Wayne Lowry. He's the president of the Alberta Fish and Game Association. I'm expecting that we'll probably not be starting in the same place when it comes to predators.
A lot of people mistake the Department of Fish and Wildlife with Fish and Game Association. Fish and Wildlife are our government agency. Fish and Game are a hunting club. Different parts of the province have had some Fish and Game Association involved with the bounties.
We've got all these special interest groups who are mostly motivated by loathing of the wolf, paying to kill wolves, and it's possible because our regulations make it possible for anybody to kill wolves.
Bounties have never been very successful in resulting in a good management, and this is why most places have abandoned bounties. In Alberta, we have bounties. It's because those carnivores are in competitions with hunting associations.
Hunters, they become rather upset that the wolves are given a priority, so to speak, on those game animals. Wolves seem to be able to have them at will, whereas with hunters, when we go out and harvest animals, we like to do it with conservation in mind. But the wolves just want to eat, and they'll continue eating until they run out of food to eat.
Through my lifetime, I've seen ungulate populations increase and increase, and in concert with that, wolf populations have recovered. But I've never seen anything that indicates to me that wolves drive ungulates down. The packs are very territorial. They're not very tolerant of each other, and you're not going to go beyond a certain number of wolves because the wolves themselves limit each other.
Our membership is on-the-ground kind of people.
Right.
So when we have 24,000 members that are spread out over the whole province and spend a lot of time in the woods, in the backcountry and on the prairies, we get a lot of feedback of what they're seeing. So it is anecdotal.
Yeah.
And I will agree to that, and sometimes it's exaggerated.
I think a lot of the misinterpretation of wolves and wolf management is just because of the lack of good information that's out there.
It's hard to say, to quantify an entire province and say how many wolves should be there.
Wolves also travel about 25 miles a day. It's near impossible to actually count wolves.
Our provincial estimate right now is right around 7,000.
Between 15 and probably close to 20,000 wolves in the province.
6,000 wolves on average, and they're putting 1,500 pups on the ground every year.
I don't know of any reputable scientists who say there's way too many wolves in the province.
We don't feel that wolf populations are out of control.
The reality is you're only taking 450 wolves that the trappers are taking out, so the population has got to be increasing.
Really, to affect ungulate populations, you have to take out like 80% of the wolves.
We could certainly trap 1,000 wolves a year in this province.
We're going to have to reduce that population by 3,000 or 4,000 wolves.
We could probably trap twice that, easily.
It would be a bad thing to try and implement such a program.
If your solution to your problem is just to kill half the wolves or to kill all the wolves, You will be doing that for the next century and you will not succeed. It's crazy. It doesn't make sense. The only way you could do it would be with a massive poisoning campaign that would take out half the other animals in the ecosystem too. So do we want to launch that kind of a war on wildlife in this province? The impression I've got right now is that with the regulations we've got is that we've got continuing chaos in wolf country, because if you've got a stable pack, big game hunter wanders in the middle of it and suddenly a couple of them are dead. And if it's the dominant wolves, then you've now lost the teachers, the adults that are teaching the younger ones to hunt. You get two wolves take down a moose, and within a couple of days, it's been stolen from them by a bear, or the ravens have eaten half of the animal, and now they got to go kill another one. Whereas if you've got a full-size pack, they take down that moose, they eat it, and the same number of wolves have less of a food footprint in a way. The idea that you can kill your way out of a wolf problem is a bit silly. The biggest cause of death amongst wolves in an unmanaged population is other wolves. Wolves are very territorial, they're very protective of their home ranges, and so there's a natural control on wolf population, which is each other.
So when people go and erratically kill at random, in some areas they will remove the dominant animals of an area, which controls the area.
There's an awful lot of, what I call mystery math and armchair biology involved in wolf management. It's all anecdotal, it's all unproven. It's basically stuff that people figure out over coffee or over beer, but it doesn't reflect what's really happening in wolf country. So there's been at least one wolf, looks like a couple that have traveled right along the edge of the parkway here. In this part of the landscape, they're protected and safe, but as soon as they go somewhere else, the habits they've learned here can actually work against them and get them killed.
When it comes to the hunting, I do hope that there's going to be more policing within themselves so that the code of sportsmanship, if you can call it sportsmanship, their code of ethics is adhered to. The idea of not letting an animal linger and suffer.
Shoot him again. Okay, let's go, Stian. You got him? You got him? Hey! Oh.
Right now, there are not limits on the number of wolves you kill. And not only that, the hunting season is so long, it leaves orphaned pups.
They can be shot 12 months of the year. Any number, whatever you want. Pregnant females, lactating females that leave pups to starve in the den. Everything. It's just incredulous of how little respect they really have for a wolf.
Drastic measures have had to take place. In situations where it's vitally important, then it becomes necessary.
Hunters are, to me, like a, stupid bunch for the most part. This is all mine, I want to have this for my use. And if any animal looks like it might be threatening your interests, then let's just kill them.
I'm a hunter. I feed my family wild deer and elk. I hunt birds. I've hunted all my life. I don't understand how anybody can be a hunter and still have an animosity towards our fellow hunter, the wolf.
When I first started talking about, instead of using lethal measures on wolves, to try to use some non-lethal measures, there was a little bit of negativity, but then come fall, when they take their cattle home and all the cattle are there, and there hasn't been any wolf kills and we still have wolves here, then I guess everything works good. This track right here is actually from last night. It's probably about almost 18 hours old, this track. As a young fella growing up, I learned that if you see a wolf, you should be shooting at it. So that's just kind of what we did. It didn't really seem to make it any different. You know, we still had wolves around cattle, and it seemed like the more we shot, the more we seen.
People have been at war with wolves in Alberta since Europeans first arrived here, especially after we started bringing domestic livestock that we needed to defend from wild predators. And in the 1950s, we had a rabies outbreak in foxes and skunks. And the government approached the rabies outbreak by getting poison baits and dropping it off randomly across the landscape. And that really wiped out what wolves remained. And then what happens is wolves are prolific animals, and the game populations were increasing with better protection and better regulations. And so there was more food for wolves, they reproduced, and they started to spread back into the countryside that they had been excluded from. You can't kill yourself out of a wolf problem. There'll always be more wolves. They're gonna keep coming back until we learn how to manage ourselves and them a lot more intelligently than we've done to date.
I guess what changed my perspective on wolves was education. I'd spent my whole life around wolves and found out I didn't really know a whole bunch about them, because anytime I'd seen one, I'd been shooting at it instead of trying to learn. If you start shooting at a pack of wolves, you might end up with 2 or 3 smaller packs of wolves, and that'll compound the problem instead of alleviating it.
In Montana recently, there was a statistical analysis done. They looked at wolf kill to reduce livestock losses. And what they found was that the more wolves you killed, the following year, the more livestock losses you had.
They need to be a family pack to bring down their natural prey. If you fragment that pack, then they're desperate or they're injured, and so they're going to go for the easier prey, which might be livestock.
You're far better off with a predictable pack of wolves, because then you kind of know their movements and know different times of year where the rendezvous sites are. What I try to do is take that opportunity away from the pack of wolves to pursue the cattle. I will try to be there at least every other day just to be around the cattle and show more presence, and I try not to set a pattern on that. I'll maybe show up early one day and later the next. That way the wolf doesn't get used to my pattern. I don't know if it's maybe a whole bunch of luck and a bunch of hard work or both, but it seems to be working.
It's not black and white. Wolves don't automatically kill livestock. Some wolves do, and they need to be dealt with, but some wolves don't, and the more enlightened livestock producers know that those are wolves that are worth hanging on to.
I guess if it come right down to it, and I did have a bad pack of wolves in here, I probably still would shoot a wolf or two, but I'm hoping it doesn't come to that.
Wolves are like dogs. They learn through success and failure, reward and punishment. And in their case, when they learn to do something that will get them an easy meal, they're going to do that again.
There are some animals that become more habituated than others to invade agricultural land and kill the livestock. If you could specifically remove these animals, probably you will just solve the problem.
I would say overall, farmers are just very, very afraid that anything is going to encroach on their property or their ability to make money. Who made us gods that we can decide what living things we can kill and which we let live?
I think my biggest problem with some of the people on the environmental and animal rights side of the equation when we come to talking about wolves is the idea that killing any wolf is wrong. Sometimes, for the long-term benefit of wolves, some wolves are going to have to go.
Management, it's a pendulum. Goes from left to right. On the left side, you have the animal rights groups, you know, that they don't even want you to look at a dog in case you insult them. And on the other side, you have the people who want to shoot everything because wildlife is theirs.
I mean, wolf management is the most divisive issue that I've ever dealt with, where I've worked with grizzly bears, I've worked with polar bears, and wolves polarize people more than any other wildlife species. We react from our emotions and not so much from a logical, kind of practical and realistic position. And it makes managing these situations very difficult.
I'm concerned that somebody's going to leave a wolf on my doorstep. I have a dog. I'm concerned that somebody might take it out on my dog. I do know wolf advocates that have come home to find dead wolves on their vehicles. So, yeah, I try to be careful.
The problem is that they've heard the stories at the kitchen table from their parents and their grandparents, and that's what they believe. A lot of what you get with wolves is a lot like religion, and you don't argue religion with people. People believe what they believe.
Historically, wolves have been very dangerous towards people. They're going to start reducing the prey, being the elk and the deer and the moose, and they're going to start exploring other prey options, being livestock and, in worst case scenario, us.
Wolves are not a threat to people. You're more at risk of being killed by a deer than you are of being attacked by a wolf.
If you actually look at the facts, in North America in the last 120 years, there's been 2 people, 2, killed by wolves. There's been more people killed in deer attacks than there have been in wolf attacks. So are we going to go out and kill every single deer out there so that everybody is safe?
I've had wolf pups in foothold traps, anesthetized them, been radio collaring them, while the mother and the rest of the pack are in the bush barking and howling all around me, and I've never felt that I was at risk of being, engaged by these wolves.
Why don't wolves attack us? It doesn't make sense to me. We're really easy, but they don't. And instead, there's this curiosity. People talk about dogs as family members, right? Well, a wolf is essentially the same animal, only it's living wild.
You hear the fairy tales or the stories of the big bad wolf and Little Red Riding Hood, right? They got a bad rap just from their reputation back in Europe, and I think that some of that was brought over. The Blackfoot people have always known the wolves to be sort of like our brothers. We weren't really afraid of them. In fact, almost like companions. So we followed them, and they showed us how to get food, hunting buffalo and those kinds of things.
I can really see that teaching us to hunt, because out there in the world, you might as well get the experts to be the teachers, right?
Minister, would you please take the oath of office? I, Kyle Norman Fawcett.
Environment and Sustainable Resource Development Minister Kyle Fawcett is responsible for overseeing wildlife policies. He declined our repeated requests for interviews, so we tracked him down at the candidates forum during his election campaign. He didn't seem to know anything about the bounties. The elected government seems to care so little about wolves, they don't even know what they're doing.
I'm not familiar with the private bounties that you're talking about. Our department doesn't sponsor any private bounties on anything.
No, you don't sponsor, but you're in charge of the regulations and you allow them.
Yes, on private property.
To write all this down and send him an email.
It's not just like I said. If you can send, we'll try to get you the answers. If you can write them down or contact my communications people.
I interviewed. We talked to Paul Frame, so who's in charge of the regulations. But he didn't.
And he's the best person to talk to him about.
He doesn't know why you allow that.
What's that?
He said he doesn't know why you allow that.
Well, you can, again, he would know more about those regulations than I do, frankly.
He's against them.
Okay, well.
But you're in charge of them.
Okay, well.
Send him an email.
There you go, send me an email.
I have sent you emails.
Government knows it's not effective. They're on record everywhere as saying they don't support the bounty. They're just happy to see everybody fighting about the bounty and whatnot and leaving them basically out of it.
They're politically effective. What it is basically you're just keeping people happy. You're keeping the people that elect Alberta governments happy. We do things to wolves that are obscenely cruel that we would never do to other animals. And you got to ask yourself why. And it goes down to that deep-rooted prejudice against wolves that somehow it's okay not just to kill them, to take their lives, but to kill them in evil, destructive, painful ways.
As the government says, and this is their line, there's lots of wolves around. What are you worried about? What harm are these bounties doing? Just be cool. Don't worry about it.
No is the right answer. I don't know why the government allowed it. I mean, no, I'm sorry. So this is we're not concerned that these types of incentives are going to threaten the wolf population. The number of wolves that are harvested each year isn't having an impact on the population. So we have pretty liberal regulations.
There's very little difference between the way the government treats wolves than they do a Norway rat.
I don't know. Okay, I think I better be done. I'm gonna get myself fired.
If I were advising the minister, Kyle Fawcett, I would really say, you know what, maybe it's time to stop doing the same thing we've always done and expect different results. What we need to do in this province, I would argue, is give wolves much more protection. Let's protect the wolves that aren't causing problems, and let's deal with the ones that are. And that means reducing the ability of people to kill wolves randomly and monitoring wolves much more closely.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Sure, I'm not the first person who's done that, I'm sure. Hopefully. Okay. Yeah, but as far as allowing it, that's beyond my pay grade, whether or not that's allowed.